It wasn't approved. It wasn't expected. It wasn't even legal by GM's own rules. But it showed up anyway, loud, fast, and unapologetically American. When the Pontiac GTO hit the streets in 1964, it didn't ask for permission. It just blew past the rulebook, set it on fire, and left the ashes in the rearview mirror. This wasn't just another car. This was the match that lit the fuse on the muscle car era, a machine forged by rebels inside GM, led by a young, brilliant, and bold John DeLorean. The GTO was born not out of corporate strategy, but out of raw, defiant enthusiasm for speed. General Motors had a corporate ban on large engines in mid-size cars. But DeLorean and his crew found a loophole: make it an optional package, not a standalone model. And just like that, a 389 cubic inch V8 found its way into a humble Pontiac Tempest. They named it GTO, a direct jab at Ferrari's revered 250 GTO. A gutsy move. But DeLorean wasn't trying to beat Ferrari at Le Mans. He wanted to beat everyone at the stoplight. The 1964 GTO came with 325 horsepower, a 4-barrel carb, dual exhaust, heavy-duty suspension, and a close-ratio 4-speed manual. It was raw, loud, and fast. Pontiac expected to sell 5,000. They sold over 32,000. The public didn't just want performance, they wanted attitude, and the GTO had that in spades. In 1965, Pontiac doubled down. The GTO gained more aggression in the styling: stacked headlights, revised grille, and functional hood scoops. But the real story was under the hood. Now available with the legendary tri-power setup, 3 2-barrel carburetors feeding that same 389 V8, the car cranked out 360 horsepower. And that wasn't just factory marketing speak. This thing moved. Road tests clocked 0 to 60 in just over 5.8 seconds, a brutal number for the mid-60s. Muscle car fever was catching on, and Pontiac was leading the charge. By 1966, the GTO broke away from the Tempest and became its own standalone model. And it exploded. Over 96,000 units sold, a number so big it forced every other Detroit automaker to scramble for an answer. It wasn't just power, it was presence. Flared rear fenders, split grills, and that unmistakable stance. It looked like a street brawler wearing a tux. And with options like Hurst shifters, rally gauges, and wood grain dash inserts, the GTO wasn't just fast, it was refined chaos on 4 wheels. But Pontiac wasn't done. In 1967, emissions regulations killed the tri-power, but the engineers countered with a new 400 cubic inch V8, mated to an improved 3-speed turbo hydromatic. The horsepower remained, but torque became king. And for true gearheads, there was now Ram air induction, a cold air setup feeding cooler, denser air straight into the beast's lungs. It wasn't just marketing, it made a difference at the drag strip. Then came 1968, and everything changed again. The GTO was redesigned with bold new curves, a Coke bottle silhouette, and the game-changing Endura front bumper, a flexible, body-colored piece that looked sleek and could take a hit without denting. GM even ran commercials showing a man smashing it with a sledgehammer. No chrome, no nonsense, just attitude. The engine options got hotter too. That 400 V8 now came with optional Ram Air 2, and if you were serious, you could spec it with high-lift cams, aluminum intakes, and tight gear ratios, turning the GTO into a legit 12-second car on the quarter mile straight from the showroom. But 1969? That's when Pontiac got crazy. In a world suddenly obsessed with budget muscle like the Plymouth Roadrunner, Pontiac responded with something wild. The Judge. Originally intended as a stripped-down street brawler, it morphed into a flashy, fully loaded beast. With outrageous carousel red paint, bold stripes, a rear spoiler, and Judge badging, it was impossible to ignore. And under the hood, the Ram Air 3 was standard. The Ram Air 4 was optional, and it was terrifying. Factory rated at 370 horsepower, but real-world dynos whispered numbers well over 400. It had forged internals, high-flow heads, and a lopey idle that warned you to keep your distance. The Judge didn't just own the street. It ruled it. By the close of the 1960s, the Pontiac GTO had sold over 500,000 units. It inspired the Chevelle SS, the 442, the Torino Cobra, the Charger RT. It lit a fire under every Detroit brand. But none could claim what the GTO did. It was the first. The one that started it all. But being first isn't just about arriving early. It's about setting the tone. And the GTO didn't just knock on the door of American performance. It kicked it open, engines snarling, tires screaming. This car didn't just ignite a market. It created a movement, a cultural explosion that stretched far beyond Detroit. Every teenager wanted one. Every gearhead respected it. Even those who couldn't afford it dreamed about it. Posters went up in bedrooms, drag strips lit up every weekend. And in neighborhoods across America, the rumble of a GTO meant something was about to happen. And then came the legends. Stories passed between friends, mechanics, and old racers, like the kid in Ohio who outran a patrol car in a '66 GTO with bald tires and borrowed plates, or the guy in California who street raced his Judge every Friday night and never lost once. Were they true? Maybe not all of them. But the GTO wasn't about facts. It was about feeling. And the name, Gran Turismo Omologato, was a daring move. It was Italian, exotic, aspirational. But Pontiac? They gave it a blue-collar heart. This wasn't for the racetrack elite. This was for the working-class warrior, the guy who punched a clock all day and wanted to punch the gas all night. It was Ferrari style, but Detroit soul. Even as the muscle car war escalated, with Chevelles boasting 454s and Mopars thundering down the track with 426 Hemis, the GTO never lost its identity. It wasn't the fastest, it wasn't the cheapest, but it had charisma, that hard-to-define quality that made it feel alive. The GTO wasn't a machine, it was a statement. And let's talk about sound. That deep, throaty growl when the V8 fired up, the scream of the revs climbing, the bark between gear shifts. It wasn't just noise, it was music, pure mechanical opera. Today's cars are quiet, controlled, sanitized. But the GTO, it was raw and unapologetic. It spoke in octane. Collectors today know the value isn't just in the chrome or numbers-matching blocks. It's in the story, the legacy. That's why original Judges fetch six figures, why barn finds go viral, why GTO forums are still alive with debates over cam specs and carb setups. Because this car mattered. And that's the beauty of the GTO's reign. It wasn't perfect. It didn't handle like a Corvette. It wasn't elegant like a Mustang. But that wasn't the point. The GTO wasn't built to impress your boss. It was built to impress your friends at midnight under streetlights, where the only thing that mattered was how quickly you could disappear when the clutch dropped. And for a generation of drivers, the GTO wasn't just a car. It was freedom, rebellion, and speed rolled into one perfectly aggressive package. Even today, 6 decades later, the legend lives on. Every time a modern muscle car fires up, it echoes back to that first roar in 1964. So, if you could take home just one GTO from that sacred run between 64 and 69, which one would it be? The understated original? The tri-power terror of 65? The Judge in full orange fury? Let us know in the comments. And if you're not already subscribed to Wheels of Glory, you're missing the ride. Hit that like button, buckle up, and join us as we keep chasing down the legends of American muscle.